Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. We've made our way to Volume 5, Chapters 11 through 20. That's what we're going to be studying today. This program is a year-and-a-half program that is a real nice addition to having developed a foundation in the path to enlightenment in our group learning program. Once you establish a really good foundation in the teachings of the Buddha on the path to enlightenment, it's nice to move into a program like this where you can more fully explore the teachings of the Buddha using his own words. And this will help you to fully get informed of what he actually taught and how to move the mind to this enlightened mental state. This book number 5, or volume 5, is titled The First Stage of Enlightenment, Stream Enter. This is where you get a nice collection of teachings, all to help you get to that important first stage of enlightenment. And once you're in that first stage of enlightenment, it will then allow you to move beyond that to ultimately get to the second, third, and then the fourth stage, which is the enlightened mental state itself. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly, and invite you to participate in our class today. We usually start this class with a meditation in order to prepare the mind for the class ahead, and we'll be doing that in the future. But today, because we have such a vast number of teachings to be studying, I'm going to forego the meditation in order to give us time to ensure that we can focus on the various chapters. There's a lot of content in each one of these chapters today, and we're going to be exploring the most important teaching that the Buddha shared, which is considered to be the highest, most ultimate truth, called dependent origination. This is where you can see the full description of what's going on in the unenlightened mind and why you keep experiencing rebirth over and over again, and why you keep experiencing discontentedness over and over again. The Four Noble Truths is a teaching that the Buddha shares that gives you a little bit of a window into what's causing the discontentedness, and that's important to first get started because it's a very simplified teaching that allows you to be able to see that. But then as you progress forward on the journey to enlightenment, you start understanding the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires of craving, anger, and ignorance. And this is also helpful for you, and it helps you to see a certain level of detail with certain solutions. But when you get to understanding dependent origination, this is where the Buddha fully explains in detail, piece by piece by piece, exactly what's leading to your discontentedness and your continuous rebirth. And this helps to inform various aspects of your practice so you can more directly target the areas that you need to address in order to move the mind to the enlightened mental state. So in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, a practitioner would need to understand dependent origination. Without understanding dependent origination, you wouldn't be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment, and therefore you wouldn't even be able to get to enlightenment itself. So understanding dependent origination in detail is utterly important to be able to get to that important first stage of enlightenment and beyond. So I'd like to be sure we have plenty of time to explore that and other teachings as well that we're going to be discussing today in today's class. The way that I do the class in the Pali Canon and English study group is I ask for volunteers from those of you that are in Zoom that if you would like to read, you can read the actual chapter, and then after somebody reads, I will share some teachings on that chapter and then open up to any questions that you have, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. You can put your questions into the comment section and I'll be able to see that and then be able to answer your question for you. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions that you like, and you can even electronically raise your hand and let me know that you're interested in reading. So I'll just put the offer out there to anybody in Zoom that would like to read. You're welcome to volunteer to read any of these chapters. If there's nobody who volunteers, I will just go ahead and read, but it looks like Donnie is volunteering to read this first chapter. So go ahead, Donnie.
Thank you, Teacher David. Chapter 11, the complete destruction of three fetters. With the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a 7 times at most attainer who, after roaming and wandering on among heavenly beings and humans 7 times at most, makes an end of discontentedness. With the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a family-to-family attainer who, after roaming and wandering on among wholesome families 2 or 3 times, makes an end to discontentedness. With the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a one-seed attainer who, after being reborn once more in human existence, make an end of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, Donnie. So here, this is some information to help you understand this first stage of enlightenment, because generally we talk about this first stage of enlightenment, we describe it as a stream enter. And the reason why it's called stream enter is because the Buddha describes a log who enters the stream is going to eventually get to the ocean. It's only a matter of time before that log gets to the ocean, which is, in the Buddha's analogy, enlightenment. So as you enter into the stream, when you get to that first stage of enlightenment, it's only a matter of time before you get to enlightenment. And the way that you can understand this is that once you attain the first stage of enlightenment for the first time in a series of rebirths, that once you attain that first stage, you're going to get to enlightenment with a maximum of 7 rebirths at most. And that would be the very first time that you actually get to that first stage of enlightenment. But then there's other types of stream enters as well that the Buddha describes. Here in the second sentence or second paragraph, he explains this family to family attainer, which is also a stream enter. But this individual, they are only going to be reborn a maximum of 2 or 3 times before they get to enlightenment. And this person, having attained the first stage of enlightenment, they're going to now be reborn from wholesome family to wholesome family to wholesome family for 2 or 3 times. And having rebirth into a wholesome family puts you at a more of an advantage to be able to move beyond that. Because if you were born into a family that has hostility or aggression and anger and lots of other things that can happen among families, abusive situations and things like this, it's a lot harder for you to move beyond that. You can surely train your mind to let that go and move beyond it. But if you've grown up in a family like that, the mind is conditioned with all the various experiences that you've had growing up in a family like that, and it's much harder to move into something like the first stage of enlightenment or beyond. But if you get to this first stage of enlightenment and die, there's the potential that someone can be a family to family attainer, meaning that they would be reborn amongst wholesome families. And being reborn into a wholesome family puts you at a better advantage of being able to move beyond that first stage of enlightenment. And that's what the Buddha is describing here, of someone who's a family to family attainer. As they're doing that, they're being reborn 2 or 3 times amongst wholesome families before they ultimately make it to enlightenment. Then the third one that he's talking about here is what's called a one seed attainer, who this individual getting to the first stage of enlightenment, they're going to be reborn one more time back into the human realm, and then they're going to get to enlightenment in that stage. It's almost like a once returner. That's the second stage of enlightenment. A once returner has eliminated the first 3 fetters, and they've thinned out number 4 and 5. And this individual is absolutely in the second stage of enlightenment going to end up coming back into the human realm and getting to enlightenment at that point. But there's also the potential of that for somebody who's gotten to stream entry and kind of gradually progressed to the point where maybe they've moved from just being a regular stream enter, being reborn 7 times, to now maybe they've become a stream enter again on their next life, which is a family to family attainer. And then ultimately they get to this one seed retainer where now they're still a stream enter, but when they die, they come right back into the world in order to be reborn into that human existence. And then from that existence, they're going to get all the way to enlightenment in that existence. But you're not required to go through each one of these individually before you actually get to enlightenment. You can actually be reborn the first time into the human realm and then make your way all the way to enlightenment within that first human existence. You're not required to do all of these things, but the Buddha is just explaining to you what is possible and what are the options of what could potentially happen to you. But notice here that there's not anything that the Buddha is really giving you that you can go out and actually do right now. He's just explaining to you wisdom of background information to help you understand the progression from one life to the next through these stages of enlightenment and within this one stage of stream entry. So I'll turn things over to you guys for questions here. Remember, you can ask questions in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So Donnie, you've got your hand up. What question do you have?
Thank you, teacher. The first part of my question would be, these 3 paragraphs are talking about 3 different people, am I correct?
These are 3 different types of attainments that are possible. Once you get into that first stage of enlightenment, you're either going to be this first, 7 times at most attainer, you're going to be a family to family attainer, or a 1 seed attainer. You can almost think of them as like subcategories within the first stage of enlightenment.
Oh, I see. Because I'm just seeing the 3 paragraphs talk about destruction of 3 fetters, all the same, but yet the first one he has to reveal 7 times, the second one 2 or 3 times, and the last one 1 time. So there's a difference, even though it's the same destruction of the 3 fetters.
Right. So that first line, that first paragraph, when you get into the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to be reborn 7 times at most. You're not going to definitely be reborn 7 times. It could be 2 times, it could be 3 times, it could be 4, 5, 6, but 7 times at most. A person who gets into the first stage of enlightenment, they won't get to an 8th rebirth. They will definitely get to enlightenment before their 8th rebirth. So a maximum of 7, but that doesn't mean that they're absolutely going to experience 7. And that's generally how you think about the first stage of enlightenment is, okay, there's a maximum of 7 rebirths. But now the Buddha is giving you a more detailed understanding that within that stage of enlightenment, there's some people who he's describing as a family to family attainer that has a maximum of 2 or 3 rebirths, and they're going to be now being reborn amongst wholesome families. So let's just say you were reborn into a wholesome family and that your family life was pretty stable and your parents treated you quite well and these kind of things. You might have attained the first stage of enlightenment in a previous life, and now having been reborn into a wholesome family in this life, you have a better opportunity to now get to enlightenment in this life. And that helps you to understand the Dhamma that sometimes people ask, like, why was I born in such a hostile family, in such a harsh family? Or why was I born in such a wholesome family, a family that really generally took care of me? The reason why is because of this stage of enlightenment, that if you've gotten into the first stage of enlightenment in a previous life, this is going to tend to lead towards rebirth into a wholesome family versus someone who's been reborn into a more hostile or aggressive family. This is someone who may not have learned and practiced these teachings in the past. And then the same thing with the 1 seed attainer. This is a subcategory within the overall stage of enlightenment of stream entry. And this is really just background information. You're not necessarily going to be able to figure out in any one particular birth of whether you're a 7 times at most attainer, a family to family attainer, or a 1 seed attainer. But it can help you, as I just mentioned, if you were reborn into a wholesome family, to understand why. That there's the potential that you might have been a stream enter in a previous life.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation, teacher.
Yes, you're welcome. Let me check the other platforms and see if we have any questions there.
No questions on YouTube.
Oh, are you looking for me, Donnie?
Yep.
Oh, thank you
Yes.
so much. I appreciate that. So that means I need to still look at Facebook though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any on Facebook or YouTube. Thank you for that assistance. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is chapter 12. Is there anyone who would like to read this one? All right, if nobody's interested in reading it, I can go ahead and read it. And then anybody who's in Zoom, if you guys would like to volunteer at any point, just raise your hand electronically and let me know. So this is chapter 12 in volume 5. It's titled, Abandoning 6 Things One is Capable of Realizing Accomplishment in View. Monks, without having abandoned 6 things, one is incapable of realizing accomplishment in view. What 6? personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, craving leading to the plane of misery, anger leading to the plane of misery, and ignorance, a knowing of true reality, leading to the plane of misery. Without having abandoned these 6 things, one is incapable of realizing accomplishment in view. Monks, having abandoned 6 things, one is capable of realizing accomplishment in view. What 6? Personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, craving leading to the plane of misery, anger leading to the plane of misery, ignorance, a knowing of true reality, leading to the plane of misery. Having abandoned these 6 things, one is capable of realizing accomplishment in view. Okay, so let's talk about this a bit. In order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, as we talked last week, there's multiple things that you need to accomplish. The primary thing that you need to accomplish is elimination of the first 3 fetters: personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. And we can talk about what these are in detail if you guys would like. But then there's also other things. There's like understanding the 5 aggregates, which we talked about last week. There's understanding the 6 sense bases. There's understanding dependent origination. There's understanding accomplishment in view and practicing accomplishment in view. There's practicing accomplishment in generosity. There's a number of different things that you need to develop. And I talked about this last week as developing the foundational teachings to get you to base camp, like at the base camp of Mount Everest, that those people who are planning to get to the summit, they've already done a tremendous amount of work understanding equipment and techniques and various aspects of hiking that allowed them just to get to base camp. And now that they're at base camp, they have more likely of an opportunity to get to the summit of Mount Everest. So the first stage of enlightenment is like getting to base camp, that you need to do all this preliminary work. But once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you have all the tools and all the techniques that you need. You still need guidance, of course, from a teacher, but you have everything on board, at least understanding it, that you need to be able to get to enlightenment, to the summit of Mount Everest, or to enlightenment itself. So one of the things that you need in order to get to this first stage of enlightenment and make your way the rest of the way to enlightenment is you need to realize accomplishment in view. You start to establish right view from the very beginning of your journey to enlightenment. That's what understanding the Four Noble Truths is it helping you to establish right view. But just learning the Four Noble Truths from the very beginning of your journey, which helps you to understand the cause of the problem in the unenlightened mind, it helps you to understand the elimination and the path forward. So you're understanding the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. You're starting to understand that when you first are introduced to the teachings of the Buddha as part of the Four Noble Truths. So you're starting to establish right view, but you haven't yet realized accomplishment in view until you've accomplished this here, which is what the Buddha is describing, which is the elimination of personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, as well as eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance that leads to the plane of misery. What this is talking about is the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. In order to get to enlightenment, you would eliminate 100% of craving, anger, and ignorance. These are the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or 3 fires, which a more detailed description of these are the 10 fetters. The 10 fetters bubble up to craving, anger, and ignorance. But in order to establish this realization of accomplishment in view, you haven't eliminated all your craving, anger, and ignorance, but you've eliminated a certain portion of it, enough of it that you will no longer be reborn into the lower realms. That's what the plane of misery is hell, animal, and afflicted spirits. Now, it's important to understand that the Buddha never used the cycle of rebirth or the realms of existence as a way to guilt, shame, or fear you into learning and practicing his teachings, because that's what you're working to eliminate, among other discontent feelings, is guilt, shame, and fear. So he's not going to use guilt, shame, and fear to help you eliminate guilt, shame, and fear. That would be silly for anybody to do that. He's just explaining true reality, that if you have a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind, you're going to be reborn into those lower realms of hell, animal, and afflicted spirits. And once you're in those realms, which we've all been in those realms before pretty much, and now we're in the human realm, but getting out of those lower realms is very challenging. You have to go through countless rebirths to get to the point where you can get to a human rebirth or a heavenly rebirth in order to be able to then experience the opportunity to get to enlightenment. So now that we're in the human realm, the last thing that we should be interested in is ever getting back into the lower realms, because gosh, we're going to be almost stuck in a prison trying to go through 100, 200, 500 different rebirths before we ever get back to the human realm again. So we should take advantage of this opportunity to now make our way to enlightenment, which is an ideal existence to be able to do that in the human realm. So by the time somebody gets to the first stage of enlightenment, yes, they've eliminated personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior, and observances, but they've also eliminated a certain amount of craving. It's not 100% eliminated, but they've eliminated a certain amount of it. Same thing with anger and same with ignorance, but they're still craving anger and ignorance in the mind. So there's this significant reduction of craving anger and ignorance, but they're still craving anger and ignorance in the mind. The craving anger and ignorance that continues to exist in the mind of someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment, there is craving anger and ignorance there, but any decisions that they make isn't going to be significant enough to have them get reborn back into the lower realms. That they've eliminated enough of the craving, anger, and ignorance that there's nothing that they would do that would cause rebirth into the lower realms. So there's been a significant reduction of craving, anger, and ignorance, but it's not fully eliminated. But there's been enough of it eliminated that whatever they choose to do for the rest of that life, it won't lead to rebirth in the lower realms. And that's what the Buddha is describing here. One of the things that I will share along these lines as well to help you see this a bit more clearly is that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, there will be this significant reduction in discontent feelings. That you will notice that from when you were off the path to enlightenment and even having started to get on the path to enlightenment, by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to see this significant reduction. The Buddha describes it as a fraction of what you once experienced. And I would agree to this, that at one point in your life, you might have been angry and hostile and bitter or having other difficulties like this. But by the time you do enough work to get to the first stage of enlightenment, because you've eliminated a significant amount of craving, anger, and ignorance, in these three fetters that he's talking about, you will have this significant reduction of discontentedness. But even in that first stage of enlightenment, and the second and third as well, you will still experience some discontentedness, but it'll be significantly diminished from where you were at one time prior to getting into that first stage of enlightenment. So if you guys have questions on any of these individual fetters, what they are and how to eliminate them, I'll be pleased to help you with that. If you have any questions on craving, anger, and ignorance and what that is and how to eliminate it, I can answer those questions for you as well. But the Buddha is just laying out for you here in no uncertain terms of some major criteria of what you need to do to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment, among all the other things that he talks about in this particular volume and book. These are 6 very important things that you would need to accomplish in order to realize accomplishment in view, which is ultimately going to help you get to the first stage of enlightenment, among other things. So it looks like we have some questions here in Zoom. Christine, if you'd like to go ahead, you're welcome to ask your questions.
Thank you, Teacher David. I have a question on eliminating anger and probably on loving kindness meditation. So I realized that, for example, I seem to not be angry at my mom, but when I interact with her, often after the interaction, I am kind of angry. But when I do the loving kindness meditation, no anger comes up. But what I have actually realized is that I might be projecting this anger on the whole country of Germany. And I realized that now I'm angry on German, at the country or on German people, which is kind of weird because it hasn't really caused me any trouble. And I'm not sure, should I start doing loving kindness meditation on a country now?
Yes. So this is when I talk about loving kindness meditation, I explain those rings and I say you can do it for an individual or a group of individuals. So wherever you see your mind having anger, hatred, ill will, or even those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, agitation, annoyance, this is all coming from the same defilement, which is this anger. It's just a lesser version of it. So you would like to essentially rewire the mind, and the loving kindness meditation is there for you to help you do that, and then to practice loving kindness through your intention, speech, and actions. So yes, you can do loving kindness meditation on a group of individuals, like may all beings in Germany be peaceful. May all beings in Germany be safe, be well, be free of discontentedness. And what I'd also like to share with you is that if you know that you're having challenges with having loving kindness towards your mom, and anger does arise when you talk to her sometimes, what I would suggest that you do is, if you know you're getting ready to call her or interact with her in some way, whatever that might be, do some loving kindness meditation beforehand, that you know you're getting ready to interact with your mom. You can do a little 10-15 minute loving kindness meditation where it's just cultivating loving kindness for yourself. Start with yourself, and then do mom like 2, 3, 4, 5 times in those rings. And now you interact with mom. And if that goes wonderful and you don't see any anger arising, okay, great. But if at any point you see anger arising, and when you get off the phone, you still have that frustration or annoyance or what have you, do some more, like another 10-15 minutes of loving kindness, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to rewire the mind to no longer have that. Whereas if you get off the phone and you're angry and you're irritable about this interaction with mom, and it's directed towards mom, now you're allowing the mind to continue to experience that anger. So the way that you'd like to handle that is by doing some loving kindness meditation, so that you don't allow the mind to continue to experience the anger. You're trying to kind of rewire the mind and retrain it to no longer experience anger. So you'd like to stomp it out as soon as you can, not allowing the mind to dwell in that anger. And whether that's for mom or anybody else, or this group of people, in Germany and all Germans, you'd like to stamp out the anger. As soon as you see it come into the mind, right away implement the solution, so that the mind doesn't get a chance to continue to sit there and be angry. Because the longer you allow it to dwell in its anger, the more likely that is to continue and to happen multiple times over the coming weeks and months and years. So you'd like to stamp it out as soon as you see it.
Thank you very much, Teacher David. This was really helpful.
Yes, you're welcome.
Can I ask a small related questions to that, or should I ask it later?
You can ask whatever you like.
So I was also wondering, with regards to the loving kindness meditation, if it makes sense to do loving kindness meditation for people from your past, where when I think about them, I feel nothing, but the interactions have not always been pleasant. Might there be like stuffed down anger that I have to eliminate, or should I just not worry about that at all?
You should never worry about anything, because that would be discontentedness. But I know what you're meaning. Like, should I be concerned about that, right? So if you have people in your past that you don't feel anything at all towards them, this means the mind isn't angry, but you're also not having loving kindness and this genuine interest for them to be well. Your mind's just like, yeah, whatever, right? So you would like to cultivate to the point where you've enveloped the entire world with loving kindness, that there isn't any being at all in the world that you don't have loving kindness for. So if you're just kind of neutral about these people from the past, you should go ahead and put them in your loving kindness meditation for a bit and allow the mind to cultivate the loving kindness. They may not be there for very long. They might move in and out of your meditation at different times. And it doesn't mean that you're going to go back and have a relationship with them at any point. But you would just like to be sure that you haven't left out any beings, that by the time your mind is fully cultivated to enlightenment, that you have nothing but this genuine interest in seeing every single being in the world be well. And that's what it means to have fully cultivated loving kindness. So if you're just neutral and just, whatever, I don't really care, you haven't yet fully cultivated and enveloped the world in loving kindness yet.
Thank you. This was really helpful.
You're very welcome. I see, Marcy, you have your hand up as well. You can go ahead with your question.
My apologies, Teacher David. You had actually answered my question. I just forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, okay, sure. Welcome. Nice to see all of you guys here in class. I'm going to check the other platforms. I don't see any questions anywhere. And I know Donnie, actually, now that I remember, you're watching those as well. So thank you for that. I'll just look out for your hand, Donnie, since you're looking at YouTube and Facebook. I won't need to look at those for the rest of this class. All right, so let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 13. Is there someone who would like to read this one? All right, Christine, go ahead.
Okay. A stream enterer understands as they really are the cause and the passing away of the world. Monks, without having abandoned six things, one is incapable of realizing accomplishment in view. Monks, an instructed noble disciple, does not think, when what exists, does what come to be? With the arising of what, does what arise? When what exists, do volitional formations, choices, decisions come to be? When what exists, does consciousness come to be? When what exists, does name and form come to be? When what exists, does the sixth sense base come to be? When what exists, does contact come to be? When what exists, does feeling come to be? When what exists, does craving come to be? When what exists, does clinging come to be? When what exists, does existence come to be? When what exists, does birth come to be? When what exists, does aging and death come to be? Rather, monks, the instructed noble disciple, has wisdom about this that is independent of others. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When there is ignorance, volitional formations, choices, decisions come to be. When there are volitional formations, consciousness comes to be. When there is consciousness, name and form comes to be. When there is name and form, the sixth sense base comes to be. When there are the six sense bases, contact comes to be. When there is contact, feeling comes to be. When there is feeling, craving comes to be. When there is craving, clinging comes to be. When there is clinging, existence comes to be. When there is existence, birth comes to be. When there is birth, aging and death comes to be. He understands thus. In such a way is there a cause and effect in the world. Monks, an instructed noble disciple does not think. When what does not exist, what does not come to be. Is the elimination of what is what eliminated. When what does not exist, volitional formations, choices, decisions not come to be. When what does not exist, does consciousness not come to be. When what does not exist, does name and form not come to be. When what does not exist, do the six sense bases not come to be. When what does not exist, does contact not come to be. When what does not exist, does feeling not come to be. When what does not exist, does craving not come to be. When what does not exist, does clinging not come to be. When what does not exist, does existence not come to be. When what does not exist, does birth not come to be. When what does not exist, does aging and death not come to be. Rather, monks, the instructed noble disciple has wisdom about this that is independent of others. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that is eliminated. When there is no ignorance, volitional formations, choices, decisions do not come to be. When there is no volitional formations, consciousness does not come to be. When there is no consciousness, name and form does not come to be. When there is no name and form, the six senses spaces do not come to be. When there are no the six sense spaces, contact does not come to be. When there is no contact, feeling does not come to be. When there is no feeling, craving does not come to be. When there is no craving, clinging does not come to be. When there is no clinging, existence does not come to be. When there is no existence, birth does not come to be. When there is no birth, aging and death does not come to be. He understands thus, in such a way the world is eliminated. Monks, when a noble disciple thus understands as they really are the cause and the passing away of the world, he is then called a noble disciple who is accomplished in view, who is accomplished in vision, who has arrived at these true teachings, who sees these true teachings, who possesses a trainee's wisdom, who possesses a trainee's true wisdom, who has entered the stream of the teachings, a noble one with penetrative wisdom, one who stands squarely before the door to the deathless enlightenment.
All right. Thank you, Christine. So as you guys see, we have a lot more content to read and discuss as part of this class. So here in chapter 13, the Buddha is setting up that you need to understand dependent origination in order to get to this first stage of enlightenment and accomplish this establishment or accomplishment in view, because the previous chapter he was talking about those 6 things that need to be abandoned in order to realize accomplishment in view. And part of eliminating those things and abandoning them, you would need to then understand dependent origination. This is kind of a little bit of a warm-up or introduction to dependent origination, helping you understand that that's what you need to do in order to get to the elimination of those 6 prior things, is that dependent origination is going to give you the insight into how to eliminate those things and why it's important to eliminate those things. So the Buddha says an instructed noble disciple does not think when what exists does what come to be, with the arising of what does what arise. You don't think that because you already know. You already know the answer. You already know because you already deeply understand dependent origination. And because one already understands dependent origination, an instructed noble disciple, someone who's deeply understanding his teachings, doesn't think about that because they already know it. So you already learned it, you understand it, you've gleaned the insight of what you need, and then you set dependent origination to the side, and now you focus on all the things that are helping you to unravel dependent origination, which the next chapter is dependent origination. Down here towards the bottom, where the Buddha says that, okay, having developed your understanding of dependent origination, you now have this accomplishment in view, accomplishment in vision, you've arrived at the true teachings, that you see the true teachings, you possess a trainee's wisdom, the true wisdom, and you've entered the stream of the teachings. That means you've entered into the stream entry, that first stage of enlightenment, and that is where one would have needed to understand dependent origination, among other things. And you have this penetrative wisdom. And he says, one who stands squarely before the door to the deathless. Once you attain enlightenment, this is also referred to by the Buddha as the deathless element. Or here he's saying that once you get to this first stage of enlightenment and having established right view and accomplishment in view, you're standing squarely before the door of the deathless. You haven't yet entered into enlightenment. The mind is not yet enlightened, but you're standing in front of the door. You have the full potential now to walk through the door and attain this deathless element. We call it the deathless element or the deathless because once you attain enlightenment, then you're no longer going to experience death. That you've already experienced birth and death countless times in the past, that now, once you've attained enlightenment in this life, at the time of death, or what we would normally call death, it's not considered to be death for an enlightened being. It's considered to be final enlightenment, because you can get to the point where your mind is enlightened in this life. And in order to accomplish that, you need to eliminate all 10 fetters, which includes eliminating all craving, desire, attachment. But there's one attachment that you can't eliminate as long as you're alive, that you can get to enlightenment and the mind is enlightened, but the mind and the body are still connected. They're still together. So that's why an enlightened being is still going to experience a certain degree of physical pain. You're not going to experience mental anguish along with the physical pain, but you'll still experience a certain amount of physical pain. It'll be muted. It'll be very insignificant for the most part. You will not experience the mental anguish along with it. But because there's this body and mind that are together, the mind is still connected to the physical body, you're still experiencing physical pain. You can't transcend all physical pain while you're in the human existence. You can transcend all mental pain, but you can't transcend 100% of physical pain yet. It's only at the time that you get to enlightenment, and now as you go through however many years of the rest of this life, when you get to the point of death of the physical body, now the body and the mind fully separate. And now the body is one thing and the mind is another thing, and they're two separate things. And now you've attained final enlightenment. We don't call it death. We call it final enlightenment because that last attachment has been eliminated. And now you won't even experience the physical pain at that point. So the Buddha doesn't refer to that as death. He refers to it as final enlightenment, where the separation of the body and the mind occur. Because in the unenlightened state, when you think about death, you might be fearful of it. You might be scared of it. But by the time you get to enlightenment and you've attained this deathless element, you're no longer scared of death. You no longer have fear of death. You're just essentially getting to the point where there's this final separation of the body and the mind, and you understand that this is all impermanence and this is going to occur. You're not scared of it. You're not worried about it or anything like that. There's no fear whatsoever because you've done all the work that you need to do to get to the point where the mind's enlightened. And one of those things that it's going to do is eliminate all fears, including the fear of death. So he refers to someone who's gotten to the first stage of enlightenment as standing squarely before the door of the deathless, meaning that you can enter into this enlightened mental state where you now can experience no death whatsoever, but you haven't yet entered into the door. You're just standing there in front of it with the potential of being able to walk through it. So let me see what questions you guys have on this. I think I saw somebody raise their hand, but I guess I must have answered your question again. I think that was Marcy or somebody, or maybe Christine. Oh, there we go. Marcy's got her hand up. Go ahead, Marcy.
Teacher David, you did answer my question, but I'm just raising my hand now to let you know that I'll read the next chapter when it comes about.
Oh, okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. I don't see Donnie's hand up, so we must not have any questions on Facebook or YouTube. So what I'll have you do, Marcy, is I'd like you to read this first part, and then I'll teach this first part first, and then we'll go into all the subsequent stuff, because this is quite a long chapter, because the Buddha explains each individual aspect of dependent origination. But I'd like to first be able to explain all of this and help you guys understand it before we go into the full out description of each individual component of dependent origination.
Okay. Dependent origination as the law of nature. A stream enterer understands condition, the cause, the elimination, and the way leading to the elimination of condition. First disclosure. Monks, with ignorance, unknowing of true reality as condition, volitional formations, choices/decisions come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With the name and form as condition, the six sense spaces. With the six sense spaces as conditions, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness.
Okay, perfect. So let's go through this and help you understand it, because dependent origination is the highest law of nature. And everything you've been doing on the path to enlightenment up to this point has been leading you to the point of being able to understand this. You've been actively working to dismantle this all the way through, whether it's learning the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the natural law of karma, the 3 poisons, all the different work, even the meditation work that you've been doing up to this point. It's all leading you to dismantle this. But now that you would like to enter into the first stage of enlightenment, you need to directly study dependent origination, because this is the kind of driving force, so to speak, behind everything else that you're doing on this path to enlightenment. So by understanding this, you will then understand what you've been doing so far and what you need to do for the rest of your journey to enlightenment, along with other things. So let me explain what it is generally, and then we'll go into detail and explain each individual aspect. The way that I encourage students to think about dependent origination is think about it almost like a mathematical equation, that the Buddha is saying at the very top line that there's this ignorance. And that when you have this ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality, then your volitional formations, or your choices and decisions, are now going to be informed by that ignorance, that you're going to make unwise decisions. So when we don't know things like the 5 precepts, we're going to kill, we're going to steal, we're going to have sexual misconduct, we're going to lie, we're going to have substances that cause heedlessness potentially, because of our ignorance, because of our unknowing of true reality, our lack of wisdom, or our confusion, our misunderstanding about the world. We will tend to do things that are described in the 5 precepts. And that's not the only things. We do other things too that are very unwise because of this ignorance, confusion, misunderstanding. One of the things we do in the unenlightened state when we have this ignorance is we blame other people for our discontentedness. And then we become bitter and harsh and aggressive. That's a volitional formation. That's a choice and decision that we make in the unenlightened state. When we have ignorance, we think everybody else is causing us to be angry. So because of our ignorance, our lack of wisdom, we make the choice and decision to be bitter and harsh and aggressive to people. And then as we're bitter, harsh, and aggressive to people, that comes back to us. And then we blame other people more. Like, look, you're being bitter, you're being harsh to me, you're being vindictive, you're being disrespectful. But we don't realize that we were that way too. That's the whole reason why it's coming back to us. So because of this ignorance, it keeps us trapped in this continuous cycle, on and on and on and on and on. And the Buddha now explains independent origination, exactly one condition to the next that leads to the next that leads to the next. And essentially what he gets to, and I'm going to explain the whole thing, but essentially what he gets to is that there's these certain feelings that arise in the mind, these conditional feelings, this discontentedness, these pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. And this is all because of craving. And then there's this clinging where the mind is holding on, wanting these pleasant feelings to be permanent, but they're not. So this is all put in motion because of our ignorance. We don't realize that those pleasant feelings are impermanent. And because of this, it leads to continuous birth. And because of continuous birth, we experience aging and death, along with sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. This is how this whole massive amount of discontentedness comes to be. So the Buddha is explaining what leads to discontentedness in very, very, very detailed terms. And what he's also explaining to you is how beings come back into the cycle of rebirth over and over and over and over again. So what dependent origination is explaining to you is in very detailed form. If you think about math, he's showing the work, so to speak. He's showing you the work. He's not just giving you the encapsulated summary that he explains in the Four Noble Truths. He's going deep, 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 penetrating in and showing you all the individual linking steps that lead to discontentedness, and that leads to continuous rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. And what you're doing on this path is you're understanding that it's ignorance that leads to those unwise choices and decisions. And then you come to understand that you need to eliminate this craving and clinging so that you can get rid of these discontent feelings. And that's what's going to lead to the elimination of this discontentedness. It's a equation. But now to go through the detail of it is that it's because of this ignorance and unknowing of true reality that we have these volitional formations are choices and decisions that are based in ignorance, this unknowing of true reality. And because of that unknowing of true reality and these decisions that we make to kill, to steal, to have sexual misconduct, to lie, to take substances that cause heedlessness, to be bitter and harsh with our speech and our actions, to be aggressive in the world, to do all these harmful things, because we keep making these unwise decisions over and over and over again, there's the conditions for consciousness to exist. What consciousness is the actual mind itself. That you can think of just consciousness as the mind, like this cardboard box of the mind. And now when there's a consciousness that's come into existence, now there's going to be this name and form. What name and form is that you're going to hear when Marcy reads it is this is the physical body essentially. So that you've got this mind and this physical body that now come to be. And because there's a mind that's waiting to be reborn, that's the condition that now leads to the taking up of this physical body or this name and form. And now at the time of conception, when there's an egg and there's a sperm, now there's a consciousness that comes in. These three things is what's now creating this being. And now that there's a consciousness and a name and form that have come together in the womb of a woman, now there's going to be the 6 sense bases are going to be developed. This is where we get our eyes, our ears, our nose, the tongue, the body itself, and then the mind, the consciousness. All 6 of these sense bases are now coming to be. They're starting to develop inside the womb. And now, as they develop inside the womb, we start experiencing contact through those 6 sense bases. Contact is that the eye is going to see a certain form, or the ear is going to hear a certain sound, or the nose is going to smell a certain odor, or the tongue is going to taste a certain flavor, or the body is going to come in contact with a certain physical object, or the mind is going to have a certain mental object. So we start having contact with things externally outside of this physical body. These 6 sense bases now start having contact. And now we start experiencing feelings based on that contact. We start experiencing pleasant feelings, which are conditioned pleasant feelings. We have conditioned painful feelings and conditioned feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. And now when we start experiencing those feelings, we start craving those pleasant feelings, wanting them to be permanent. So now we start clinging to certain things that are bringing us those pleasant feelings. And now because of that, clinging and holding on to this world, wanting things to be a certain way, we experience continuous existence, that we keep existing due to birth, which there's now birth. And now because of birth, whenever we experience birth, we're going to automatically experience aging and death. And what comes with that is this sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. That's the discontentedness. He's describing specifically certain painful feelings as part of discontentedness, but ultimately it's all discontentedness. That's how this whole massive amount of discontentedness starts and comes to be. So now that I've explained it in detail form, let me give you an example that we can walk through. Let's just say there's a being now today, this person A, who is making all kinds of unwise decisions because of their ignorance and their unknowing of true reality. They're just making all kinds of unwise decisions, which are volitional formations. And now they die. So now they die, and now because of those unwise decisions, part of those unwise decisions is craving is still in the mind. There's this longing and yearning, this chasing after the objects of your affection still in the mind because you didn't eliminate it. Because of your ignorance, you still are making volitional formations that allows craving to continue. And now that craving is the fuel that causes consciousness to continue. It's like a fire, that you have this fire that the logs keep getting tossed onto this fire, and this fuel of the logs, it keeps sending sparks off into the air, and now these sparks get carried by the wind and it lands and creates a new fire. But if we get rid of the fuel, if we eliminate the fuel, the fire will be extinguished and there won't be any more sparks to create the next fire. So because of our ignorance and unknowing of true reality, we kept making volitional formations or choices and decisions that allow this craving, desire, attachment to continue in the mind, and it keeps throwing off sparks. And because we keep throwing off sparks, we keep getting to the point where now there's a new consciousness that comes to be. Person A dies, they still have craving in the mind, it throws off a spark, and now this new consciousness comes to be. And now with this new consciousness, it's looking for a physical body. Where can I be reborn? What realm can I be reborn in? There's this natural law of Gamma, of course, that is determining what realm a being is reborn into. But if there's a consciousness, there's going to be rebirth. And specifically talking about the human realm here, there's this consciousness that is now looking for a name and form in order to come into the world, because the mind is still clinging to the world. And now in that womb, we're developing these 6 sense bases. And now that we've developed these 6 sense bases, we're experiencing contact through these 6 sense bases. And as we are entering into the world, we start experiencing certain pleasant feelings. And now let's just say, as we were born, at some point, we had this contact where maybe our mom or our dad gave us chocolate for the first time. And now that we experience the pleasant feelings that arose due to having the chocolate. Before we knew what chocolate was, we didn't have any particular feelings related to chocolate. But once chocolate hit the tongue of the 6 sense bases and we had that contact with the chocolate, now there's this pleasant feeling that arises up in the mind. Like, oh, wow, that was pleasant. That felt great. And now the mind's going to start craving it. It's going to start wanting it, longing for it, yearning for it, looking out, chasing after that chocolate, wanting it more and more and more and more, because it's not necessarily the chocolate that the mind is longing and yearning for. It's longing and yearning for those pleasant feelings. That's what it wants. That's what the mind wants, is those pleasant feelings. So because of those pleasant feelings that we experience, craving comes to be. We start longing and yearning for those pleasant feelings. So now we cling to whatever object it was. We perceive that that chocolate is what created those pleasant feelings. So now we cling to it and we hold on to it and we keep wanting it over and over and over and over and over and over again. And now we're holding on to a certain aspect of this world, wanting these pleasant feelings over and over and over again. So now we experience continued existence through birth. And now we keep coming back into this world over and over again. We are experiencing aging and death. And now we experience this continued sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair, because those feelings that were pleasant, they're not permanent. The mind is chasing with craving and having clinging, wanting these feelings to be permanent. But we get those temporary pleasant feelings and we experience them for a period of time. But ultimately, it's only a matter of time before our mind ends up in these painful feelings. Because of impermanence, we can't permanently get what the mind's craving. So as long as the mind's having any type of craving, it's going to get that in certain situations. But in some situations, it's not going to get it. So when it doesn't get what it wants due to impermanence, that craving is still there. So that's why the mind is now sorrowful or grief or pain, displeasure, and despair. So when our mom or dad gives us chocolate, we get pleasant feelings. But when we don't get the chocolate and they say, no, you can't have that chocolate, right? We cry, we're sorrowful, we're having pain and displeasure because the chocolate isn't permanent. But the mind wants it to be permanent. And because of this craving and clinging, the mind keeps longing and yearning. And now it's not just the chocolate anymore that we experience discontentedness about. It's about any number of things. That you spend time with your grandmother and you get all these pleasant feelings. And now you're craving for grandma to be permanent. And then when she dies, your mind grieves because you're not getting what you want, which is time with grandma. Or you want your car to be permanently beautiful. And now when it gets in an accident, this represents impermanence. And now because the mind's craving and clinging for the car to be permanently beautiful, you now experience sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair when it gets into an accident. Or any number of things. We could go on and on and on, any number of examples that at some point you got pleasant feelings related to that object. And then you allowed your mind to crave. And because of that craving, clinging is in the mind, and now you're going to continue to experience this grief, pain, and displeasure. And if you don't eliminate it, then you're going to keep coming back over and over and over again and experiencing it over and over and over again. So all of this is going into action because of the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So what you gather from dependent origination is your number one goal is to eliminate ignorance, because that's what's putting this whole cycle in motion, is the ignorance. And this is what your number one goal is, to eliminate ignorance by cultivating wisdom. And that's why when a student first starts with me, I will share with them, don't believe anything I ever say, because belief, you don't know what's true or false. It doesn't lead to wisdom. So I start a student at the same place where I know they need to end. They need to end with wisdom. That's what ends this whole cycle of rebirth, and that's what ends discontentedness, is getting to wisdom. So I start students the very first time they learn with me with understanding that they can't believe what I'm saying. They can't believe what the Buddha is saying. They need to get to wisdom, because your number one goal is to eradicate this wisdom. Because if you can eliminate this ignorance, then you're going to eliminate volitional formations based in ignorance. And if you can eliminate volitional formations based in ignorance, then you'll eliminate consciousness, and you'll eliminate taking up name and form, and you'll eliminate the six sense bases coming to be. You'll eliminate contact through those six sense bases. You eliminate conditioned feelings. You will eliminate craving, desire, attachment. You're eliminating the clinging. Then you'll eliminate existence. You'll eliminate birth, and you'll eliminate aging and death. And then you're going to eliminate this whole massive amount of discontentedness, which the Buddha is describing: sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. But if you just believe the teachings of the Buddha, you won't be able to eliminate the ignorance. So by eliminating ignorance, you learn about conditioned feelings, pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. You learn about how craving, desire, attachment is what's causing those. And then because of that, you can eliminate birth, and you can eliminate discontentedness as well. So your number one goal is to eliminate this ignorance. So even though in the three poisons we talk about it as craving, anger, and ignorance, what you learn here in dependent origination is that it's because of ignorance that craving and anger continues to exist, because it's ignorance that allows craving to continue, and then that's where you're getting angry. So it's because of ignorance that craving and anger continues, that we're ignorant to realize that it's our cravings that are causing the anger to arise. We're ignorant of that in the unenlightened state. That's why we blame other people. We think other people are causing us to be angry or somehow discontent. But when you study dependent origination, you can see with clarity in all these interlinking steps, and you can independently verify this for yourself, that this is indeed what's occurring, that you start to understand that, yes, my number one goal on this path is to eliminate ignorance. And by gaining wisdom, I can learn how to eliminate craving. And by eliminating craving, I will eliminate anger and all these other discontent feelings. And he's showing you here in long form, in detail, exactly how all of this comes to be. And I have here in this chapter, I have these tables which help you understand that there's these past causes, which in the past we had ignorance, and we had volitional formations that were based in ignorance. In the lives prior to this one, we had this ignorance and this volitional formations based in ignorance. So because of those past causes, then there's these present effects of consciousness, name and form, the six sense bases, contact and feeling. This is what we're experiencing in the present moment based on past causes of ignorance and volitional formations. But now in the present moment, there's craving, clinging, and existence. These present causes can lead to these future effects of birth, aging, and death. This is showing you how this past experiences are creating present situations, and then there's present causes that are going to create future things if you don't unravel this. And then there's this other table that helps you understand that also within each individual life, you're also experiencing all of these. This first table is helping you understand the building effect of past, present, and future, but also you're experiencing in the unenlightened state ignorance, volitional formations, consciousness, name and form, 6 sense bases, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, existence, birth, aging, and death, which is leading to discontentedness. You're experiencing it in that past life totally. You're also experiencing it in this present life as well. Like right now, you're experiencing in the unenlightened state all 12 of these things. And then if you don't do anything about it, you will experience in a future life all of these things as well. But what you're attempting to do on this path to enlightenment is unravel all of this. You're trying to dismantle this dependent origination, so that if you understand that it's this discontentedness keeps arising in the mind, and you're trying to eliminate that discontentedness, and that's what you're trying to eliminate, well, then you go all the way back to the very beginning of the equation, and this is a sequence of events that's occurring. In order to eliminate this discontentedness, you have to eliminate this first thing. You have to eliminate this top line ignorance, and that's why you don't believe anything and you work to get to wisdom. And now the wisdom of the teachings of the Buddha is going to help you understand how to eliminate those conditioned feelings that are based in craving and clinging. And then by having done that, and you see this diminishing of discontentedness, you will know that this equation is working in your favor, because you're starting to see this diminishing of discontentedness. And then having eliminated discontentedness, you will know that there isn't going to be any more rebirth, because if you've eliminated the very bottom of the equation, then all of this isn't going to occur anymore from that point forward. So let me see what questions you guys have on this before Marcy reads the rest of this chapter. You can ask questions in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, Marcy, go ahead.
Thank you, Teacher David. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So every time when I have discontentedness arise and I do that investigation to find out the cause, the cravings for that discontentedness, is that me using this mathematical equation to eliminate it, to gain that wisdom? Am I doing dependent origination with each time I'm coming across a certain feeling, and then I investigate to find what that craving is and then work on to eliminating it? Is that kind of what I'm doing?
Yes, pretty much, but you don't necessarily have to keep this in the forefront of your mind. This is explaining to you what's truly happening in detail form, and once you understand it, you can set it aside and now just focus on cultivating wisdom, focus on eliminating cravings and clinging, and eliminating discontentedness. And that's where the Eightfold Path is there, teaching you how to do that. It's teaching you the wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline, that when you see discontentedness arising as a bodily sensation with your mindfulness, you cut it off and let it go, so that now you can restrain the mind and retrain it. And that's where you're getting wisdom of the Eightfold Path, because the Eightfold Path is the escape. That's how to escape all of this discontentedness. But if you're ignorant of the Eightfold Path, you wouldn't know how to implement it in the present moment. So once you understand this, you can set it aside and just realize, like, yes, this is indeed what is occurring, but you don't need to reference this and go back to it at every moment. This is kind of like the underlying engine that is driving all the discontentedness and rebirth to occur. And once you understand the engine, now with your car, you just keep putting fuel in it every single time. You don't have to understand the pistons and the spark plugs and the oil filters, and you don't have to go in and tweak all of that stuff all the time. You just know that you got to keep putting gas in the car because the engine needs this gas. So it's the same kind of thing as once you understand the detail like this, okay, I understand the detail. So what this means is now I need to cultivate wisdom. I need to eliminate this craving and clinging. And whenever I see discontentedness arising, I need to apply the mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path, which is to restrain the mind and pull it back and cut off and let go of the discontentedness as a bodily sensation. Well, how do I do that? Oh, I got to do breathing mindfulness meditation in order to train my mind to be able to be aware of those bodily sensations and be able to easily cut it off and let go. Okay, well, how do I let go of anger? oh, okay, now I need to do loving kindness meditation in order to eliminate the anger. So this is giving you the why of how this all fits together. And once you understand it, you can just set it to the side and then focus on your Eightfold Path and just continue to dial that in closer and closer, because that's what's going to lead to the dismantling of all of this. And that's also what's going to lead to dismantling the 10 fetters, because we're ignorant of those 10 fetters. That's part of our ignorance in the unenlightened state, that we don't even know that we're afflicted by these 10 fetters, and we don't know them because of our lack of understanding. And we keep making decisions through our central desire, through our ill will, through our conceit, through all those other fetters. And one of the fetters is actually ignorance and this unknowing of true reality. So once you understand this, you can set it to the side and then just focus on the actual day-to-day practice of generosity, of breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation. Whenever you see discontentedness arising, you cut that off and let it go, and those other facets of what you're putting together as your practice.
Thank you, teacher.
You're welcome. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. So, Marcy, if you'd like to read the rest of this, what the rest of this is, it's quite long. What the Buddha is going to do is he's going to explain to you each one of these things, and he's doing it in reverse order. He's going to explain to you what aging and death is. He's going to explain to you what birth is, what existence is, what clinging is, so that you understand what each one of these are, so that you can then skillfully eliminate each one of these, so that you'll be able to then dismantle this dependent origination.
And what, monks, is aging and death? The aging of the various beings in the various orders of beings, their growing old, brokenness of teeth, grayness of hair, wrinkling of skin, decline in vitality, degeneration of the senses, this is called aging. The passing away of various beings from the various orders of beings, their perishing, their breakup, disappearance, mortality, death, completion of time, the breakup of the aggregates, the lying down of the carcass, this is called death. Thus, this aging and this death are together called aging and death. With the arising of birth, there is the arising of aging and death. With the elimination of birth, there is elimination of aging and death. Just this noble eightfold path is the way leading to the elimination of aging and death. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And what, monks, is birth? The birth of the various beings into the various realms of beings, their being born, descent into the womb, production, the coming together of the aggregates, the obtaining of the senses bases, this is called birth.
You don't need to read this over and over. It's the same thing, Marcy, all the way.
Okay. And what, monks, is existence? There are these three kinds of existence: sense sphere existence, 6 sense bases; form sphere existence, from form realms; formless sphere existence, formless realms. This is called existence. And what, monks, is clinging? There are these 4 kinds of clinging: clinging to sensual pleasure, clinging to views, clinging to rules and vows, clinging to notions of self. This is called clinging. And what, monks, is craving? There are these 6 classes of craving: craving for forms, craving for sounds, craving for odors, craving for flavors, craving for physical objects, craving for mental objects. This is called craving. And what, monks, is feeling? There are these 6 classes of feeling: feeling born of eye contact, feeling born of ear contact, feeling born of nose contact, feeling born of tongue contact, feeling born of body contact, feeling born of mind contact. This is called feeling. And what, monks, is contact? There are these 6 classes of contact: eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, mind contact. This is called contact. And what monks are the 6 sense bases? Eye base, the ear base, the nose base, the tongue base, the body base, the mind base. These are called the 6 sense bases. And what monks is name and form? Feeling, perception, volitional formation, choices, decisions, contact, consciousness. This is called name. The 4 great elements and the 4 great elements and the form derived from the 4 great elements. This is called form. Thus, this name and this form are together called name and form. And what monks is consciousness? There are these 6 classes of consciousness: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. This is called consciousness. And what monks are volitional formations? There are these 3 kinds of volitional formations, choices, decisions: the bodily volitional formation, the verbal volitional formation, the mental volitional formation. These are called the volitional formations. With the arising of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, there is the arising of volitional formations. With the elimination of ignorance, there is the elimination of volitional formations. Just this noble eightfold path is the way leading to the elimination of volitional formations. That is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And when monks, a noble disciple, thus understands the conditions, thus understands the cause of the conditions, thus understands the elimination of the conditions, thus understands the way leading to the elimination of the conditions, he is then called a noble disciple who is accomplished in view, who is accomplished in vision, who has arrived at these true teachings, who sees these true teachings, who possesses a trainee's wisdom, who possesses a trainee's true wisdom, who has entered the stream of the teachings, the noble one with penetrative wisdom, one who stands squarely before the door of deathlessness, enlightenment.
Thank you so much, Marcy. That was wonderful. So here you can see all the different details of each individual factor of dependent origination. And you can see that once you understand this, then the Buddha basically is saying, okay, focus on the Eightfold Path. Once you understand it, that's what I was saying earlier, is once you understand dependent origination thoroughly and you understand what your goal is, you can set it to the side and now just focus on the Eightfold Path and developing that more and more and more, because that's giving you the real work. This here is just explaining to you the background of why you're doing the work. But you need to understand that in order to understand that you need to get to wisdom, you need to eliminate craving and clinging, and that's what's ultimately going to eliminate discontentedness in rebirth. But it's the Eightfold Path that's going to tell you how to do it, how to do the actual work, the day-to-day work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I'll open up to any questions that you guys have on any of these individual factors, because rather than going through each one and explaining them, I think the Buddha did a really good job of explaining them. But if you have questions on them, because some of the things that he's talking about, like things like name and form, he's using kind of an old historical way of describing name and form that you might need help with. Like you might ask, like, what are the 4 great elements? If you don't know what those are, you might have that question. So if you have any questions on any of these individual aspects of dependent origination, let me know and I'll explain it to you. Marcy, go ahead.
Yes, Teacher David, that was going to be one of my questions, is to understand the 4 great elements and the form derived from the 4 great elements.
Okay, so during traditional times, and even now in traditional Thai medicine in some places, they look at the body as 4 great elements. This is the earth, water, wind, and fire element. These 4 elements is how they describe the body. So like the teeth, all the solids of the body, these are the earth element. So like the teeth, the bones, the fingernails, these are all what we call the earth element. Then we have things like the water element. The water element are the fluids of the body. So like the blood, the saliva, the tears, the urine, things like this. This is described as the water element. Then we have the wind element. The wind element is the movement of things through the body. So like your feces moving through the body, or like in your intestinal tract, the movement of the substance through the intestinal tract. Or like the blood is the water element, but the movement of the blood is from the wind element. So any kind of movement in the body is considered the wind element. And then the fire element, this is the temperature and the heat of the body, oftentimes associated with digestion. So when they would describe the body, because they didn't have the scientific knowledge that we have today, they would describe it through these four great elements of earth, water, wind, and fire. And in the earth is the solids, the water is the fluids, the wind is the movement, and the fire is the heat. So now when they describe the body that way, they would diagnose the body through these four elements, so that if there's sickness in the body, it's like, oh, you have a depletion of the earth element, and you have an elevated wind and water element, and your fire element is maybe neutral. And now that helps them to understand how to provide treatment to the body. And this is still in existence in some traditional medicines. Like here in Thailand, they have traditional Thai medicine, and they use the element theory of the four elements in order to understand the body and look at the body, diagnose it. And then they prescribe certain herbs and certain traditional medicine based on, they would like to maybe bring the earth element down, or they would like to raise the water elements or the wind element, or they would like to support the fire element or something like this. So that's how they described it. Nowadays, we talk about the body as cells and molecules and bones and different things like this, that we have much deeper understanding of the body than they had back then. But that's what he's describing here, is those four elements. And that's why I help you to understand that what he's really describing in name and form is he's describing the physical body. But these are also the aggregates. So if you understand the five aggregates, which are form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness, that's what makes a living being, is the five aggregates. We studied this last week. Form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. That's what makes a living being. So what he's describing here as name and form is the four great elements. That's the first aggregate. Then feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness, those are the other aggregates. So here in name and form, he's describing all five aggregates, but he's adding this one thing, which is contact. So essentially, name and form is the five aggregates with contact included. And when he talks about the five aggregates, he's saying this is how to determine that there is a living being, is that they're going to have the five aggregates. And now he's describing that as name and form. All right, so yeah, you're welcome, Marcy. Tonka, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Teacher David. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about volitional formations causing consciousness. Like, to me, I understand more that craving and clinging, they would cause a new existence, and they would cause consciousness. But I'm not sure if I understand how volitional formation causes consciousness.
Sure. What the fuel to rebirth is craving, desire, attachment, that mental longing, strong eagerness. The Buddha talks about this in other discourses, that he says craving is the fuel that leads to the next rebirth. But in order for craving to exist, there has to be volitional formations that are now ignorant. That's the whole reason why craving exists in the mind, is because of the choices and decisions that are the bodily, verbal, and mental formations. As we make unwise decisions, we allow craving to persist. So it's craving itself that is the fuel that causes rebirth. But what the Buddha is doing in this whole equation, that I call it, he's explaining all the details. So it's ignorance that leads to having craving to exist in the mind, and that's what's causing discontentedness. That's like the top line, the middle, and the bottom, right? And the bottom is like the bottom of the equation, that all of these things is what leads to the answer of the equation, which is it's going to lead to discontentedness. So you can look at the ignorance and the craving is what equals the discontentedness. That's what comes together to cause the discontentedness. But now he's showing you the detailed work that because of ignorance, there's these volitional formations that are allowing the cravings to continue, and that's what then leads to consciousness.
Okay, thank you very much. So without the craving, we wouldn't have volitional formations, right?
We will still have volitional formations, but they won't be based in ignorance any longer. So like once you unravel all this and you no longer have ignorance and you no longer have discontentedness, you will still be making volitional formations in terms of choices and decisions, but now your choices and decisions will be based in wisdom instead of ignorance. And now because you have replaced this ignorance with wisdom, now with that wisdom, now you'll make volitional formations through that wisdom, and you'll be making wise decisions. And because of that, part of your wise decisions is you completely eliminated craving, you completely eliminated anger, you completely eliminated ignorance. And because of that, there will no longer be any consciousness whatsoever. There won't be a next consciousness.
Okay, so we can have wholesome volitional formations, right? We always have volitional formations there, but they can be wholesome or unwholesome, considering if we are ignorant or not ignorant.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. What dependent origination is explaining is how all of this comes to be and how it leads from ignorance from one life, leads to rebirth, and leads to continuous discontentedness. But you can dismantle this by now having wisdom. And if you fully cultivate wisdom and your mind's enlightened, you will still make volitional formations for the rest of that life. But now they're going to be based in wisdom. So it's not going to then lead to a consciousness for your next life because you've dismantled all of this.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 15. Let me see something here. This is essentially what we're just talking about with dependent origination. It's just explained in a different way. I'm looking at the time. I'd like to be sensitive to y'all's time. This is essentially explaining dependent origination in a slightly different way. He's explaining the elimination of it in that you're eliminating the aging and death, and he's going backwards now. I'm not sure if the hands that you guys are raising are for questions on dependent origination or if you guys would like to read. If you guys have questions on dependent origination, go ahead and ask those. Nope. Okay, so it's for reading. Okay, thank you guys for volunteering. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skip over this because we've already penetrated independent origination quite well. He's also explaining each individual factor again here in this discourse. Let's get to something else. Let's see, even this one. Let me talk about this one. This is connecting dependent origination to understanding how to eliminate and unravel dependent origination. So here, if you understand the wisdom of aging and death, you understand that description in dependent origination of what aging and death is. You understand the cause of aging and death, which is birth, in this case. And then you understand the elimination of aging and death is to eliminate birth. And then you understand that the wisdom of the way leading to the elimination of birth is to practice the Eightfold Path, right? And then it's like each individual thing, this 44 cases of wisdom is that you understand these interlinking connections from one aspect of dependent origination to the other. And he's just describing that for you here in long form. And if you've studied this on your own, then you may have questions on it and you're welcome to ask me any questions that you like. But here he's just explaining the dismantling of dependent origination, and that for each one of these conditions of dependent origination, you should understand what it is, you should understand what causes it, you should understand the elimination of it, and then the way leading to the elimination. And you might have gotten that out of our talk, but you might need to more deeply study this and make sure you understand each one of those. Then he describes it now in super detail, which is the 77 cases of wisdom, where he goes through each individual aspect of each individual grouping, where here with aging and death has birth as condition. And then that when there is no birth, there's no aging and death. And then in the passing to of aging and death had birth as condition. And then he's just showing you how to essentially dismantle this piece by piece by piece. And he's going to do that for each individual aspect of this. There's a lot of content here that he's just explaining to you how to dismantle it, which we just talked about in kind of a shorter format. But if you would like to read this, read that, and then let me know if you guys have any questions. So we can pick this up with reading and helping you to understand here. But if you guys have questions on any of those previous chapters from your reading, let me know, and we'll go back and I'll help you understand it. But those are just showing you how to dismantle the dependent origination. And this is also helping you to understand that too, but I've got it shortened up here where we don't have to go through each individual facet of it. But this is going to help you to understand the wisdom of principle and the wisdom of entailment. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, go ahead, Max.
Thank you, sir. Wisdom of the principle and wisdom of entailment, a stream enterer. And what, monks, is aging and death? The aging of the various beings and the various orders of beings, their growing old, brokenness of teeth, grayness of hair, wrinkling of skin, decline of vitality, degeneration of the sense bases. This is called aging, the passing away of the various beings from the various orders of beings, their perishing, breakup, disappearance, mortality, death, completion of time, the breakup of the aggregates, the laying down of the carcass. This is called death. Thus, this aging and this death are together called aging and death. With the arising of birth, there is the arising of aging and death. With the elimination of birth, there is the elimination of aging and death. This noble eightfold path is the way leading to the elimination of aging and death. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When, monks, a noble disciple thus understands aging and death, its cause, its elimination, and the way leading to its elimination, this is his wisdom of the principle. By means of this principle that is seen, understood, immediately attained, comprehended, he applies the method to the past and to the future thus. Whatever ascetics and Brahmins in the past directly knew aging and death, its cause, its elimination, and the way leading to its elimination, all these directly knew it in the very same way that I do now. Whatever ascetics and Brahmins in the future will directly know aging and death, its cause, its elimination, and the way leading to its elimination. All these directly know it in the very same way that I do now. This is his wisdom of entailment. When, monks, a noble disciple has purified and cleansed these two kinds of wisdom, wisdom of the principle and wisdom of entailment, he is then called a noble disciple. Who is accomplished in view? Who is accomplished in vision? Who has arrived at these true teachings? Who sees these true teachings? Who possesses a trainee's wisdom? Who possesses a trainee's true wisdom? Who has entered the stream of the teachings? A noble one with penetrative wisdom, one who stands squarely before the door to the deathless enlightenment.
Okay, thank you, Max. So what the Buddha is helping you to understand is what's called the wisdom of principle and the wisdom of entailment. And he goes through for each individual condition of dependent origination and explains to you in detailed form what is the wisdom of principle and what is the wisdom of entailment. What the wisdom of principle is that he's encouraging you to understand each individual condition of dependent origination. And when you understand what is aging and death, when you understand what is birth, so forth and so on, all the way through to the six sense bases, consciousness, volitional formations, ignorance, all those individual conditions, then you have wisdom of principle because you understand what each individual one of these conditions in dependent origination is, and you've attained this wisdom of principle. Now, when you understand the interlinking aspect of dependent origination, this is what's called wisdom of entailment. Understanding that if this condition exists, then this condition is going to come to be. And if this condition exists, then this is going to come to be. So the wisdom of entailment is understanding the interlinking connectivity from one condition to the next, to the next, to the next. This helps you in dependent origination, but it also helps you in daily life as well, that you understand that in order to understand anything around you, you have to understand what this thing is, and then you have to understand how it connects to other things. So let's just take something simple that I think you can relate to, is that there's a house. In order for there to be a nice environment to sleep in, you need to have walls. And in order for there to be walls, there needs to be wood or concrete or something else. And then in order for those walls to stand up, there needs to be a certain structure. And then for that certain structure to remain healthy, there needs to be a roof to protect it from water and sun and any kind of other outside elements. So each one of these things, in order for it to be true that you have a nice sleeping environment in your home, there needs to be one interlinking thing to the next. And this is the cause and effect, or the causality of how the entire world functions. This is the natural law of karma. Why are you able to take this class? Well, you must have worked. You must have gone to work and shown up on time. You must have collected a paycheck. You must have went out and purchased an electronic device. And now you have that electronic device, you're able to learn these teachings. It's one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. So dependent origination is showing you that as it relates to discontentedness and rebirth. And you need to understand that in order to get to this first stage of enlightenment. But now you can understand that interlinking, or that interconnectivity of all the decisions that you make in your life. It's one thing that leads to the next, that leads to the next, that leads to the next. And you would like to inject as much wisdom into your life as possible so that you're making wise decisions in all aspects of your life. So wisdom of principle is understanding the actual thing. Wisdom of entailment is understanding how that thing leads to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. Any questions on this? Okay, Marcy.
Thank you, Teacher David. So you had mentioned karma in this, and I just want to see if I'm kind of understanding it. So we have dependent origination of each one of these conditions, but is the same kind of cause and effect kind of applied when we think about like karma in a sense? I don't know if my question, if I'm making sense correctly. Maybe I'm just trying to draw a parallel between dependent origination and karma, how with dependent origination, there is a condition exists that creates a next thing to the next thing, whereas where karma, we have these volitional formations of decisions that we make that then perpetuate a effect, and that just keeps going. Am I understanding that?
Yes, and that is our karma. That's the results of our decisions. That because we chose to remain ignorant or unknowing of true reality, it led to unwise decisions or volitional formations that now is producing consciousness, name and form, the 6 sense bases, and so forth and so on. It's also producing other things in our life too, like if someone's aggressive or hostile or bitter to you, or other things that you experience in life, either wholesome or unwholesome. When you're making decisions, it's going to produce either, if you're making a wise decision, it's going to produce wholesome results. If you're making an unwise decision, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So everything you're experiencing in life is a result of your decision or your karma. And dependent origination is explaining to you one aspect of that karma, that the reason why you keep experiencing discontentedness over and over again is because there's ignorance and because there's craving. This is why you keep experiencing discontentedness over and over. And that is your karma. And now you can unravel it with the wisdom of understanding the cause and effect, or the causality of how one thing leads to the next. And that's why you ultimately walk away from dependent origination with the understanding that I need to cultivate wisdom. That's what I need to do. I need to cultivate wisdom. That's the only thing that's going to unravel all of this. And this is what helps you to understand the elimination of those wrong behavior and observances, that third fetter, in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. That if you have wrong behavior and wrong observances, you're not understanding dependent origination, because dependent origination is helping you understand the whole problem is ignorance. And the only way to unravel that is get to wisdom. So there's no rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship that's going to allow you to cultivate wisdom. I could sprinkle water on you. I could tie strings on your wrist. You could do any kind of rite, ritual, ceremony, and worship, but you're never going to get to wisdom. You're going to keep going home from that experience of the rite, ritual, ceremony, and worship, and you're going to go back home and you have no wisdom. You're going to go out into the world and be bitter and harsh and aggressive and hostile with people. This is why people can show up to a building, spend an hour or two doing all these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, and they go out in the parking lot and they're hostile and mean and aggressive to people because they haven't learned the wisdom of how to improve their conduct. So dependent origination, among other things that I've already described, it's helping you to understand that you need to focus on the cultivation of wisdom and get rid of these wrong behavior and observances, because that's going to lead to continuous discontentedness if you keep conducting yourself in the world through your moral conduct in unwise ways, or if you continue to indulge in rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. It's not going to lead to transforming the ignorance to get to wisdom. And that would be your Gama if you cultivate that.
Thank you, Teacher David. That was most beneficial.
Yes, you're welcome. All right, so let's move on to the next one, chapter 19. Someone would like to read this one? Okay, we've got a few people there. Marcy, we'll go to Tonka. Maybe you can read the next one, since you already read one. Go ahead, Tonka.
Thank you. A stream enterer has abandoned confusion in the case of clinging to aggregates. Monks, when what exists by clinging to what? By adhering to what does such a view as this arise? The winds do not blow, the rivers do not flow, pregnant women do not give birth, the moon and sun do not rise and set, but stand as steady as a pillar. Venerable Sir, our teachings are rooted in the perfectly enlightened one. Take recourse in the perfectly enlightened one. It would be good if the perfectly enlightened one would clear up the meaning of this statement. Having heard it from him, the monks will remember it. Then listen and attend closely, monks. I will speak. When there is form, monks, by clinging to form, by adhering to form, such a view as this arises. The winds do not blow, the rivers do not flow, pregnant women do not give birth, the moon and sun do not rise and set, but stand as steady as a pillar. In the case of feeling, perception, volitional formations, choices, decisions, and consciousness, the discourses are identical except for the reference to each of the aggregates previously mentioned. What do you think, monks? Is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent discontentedness or peacefulness? Discontentedness, Venerable Sir. But without clinging to what is impermanent, discontentedness and subject to change, could such a view as this arise? The winds do not blow, the rivers do not flow, pregnant women do not give birth, the moon and sun do not rise and set, but stand as steady as a pillar. No, Venerable Sir. In case of feeling, perception, volitional formations, choices, decisions, and consciousness, the discourses are identical except for the reference to each of the aggregates previously mentioned. That which is seen, heard, sensed, recognized, attained, sought after, and ranged over by the mind, is that permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent discontentedness or peacefulness? Discontentedness, Venerable Sir. But without clinging to what is impermanent, discontentedness and subject to change, could such a view as this arise? The winds do not blow, the rivers do not flow, pregnant women do not give birth, the moon and sun do not rise and set, but stand as steady as a pillar. No, Venerable Sir. When monks, a noble disciple has abandoned confusion in these 6 cases, and then further he has abandoned confusion about discontentedness, the cause of discontentedness, the elimination of discontentedness, and the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. He is then called a noble disciple who is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the nether world, fixed in destiny with enlightenment as his destination.
All right. Thank you, Tonka. So here, this is helping you to understand eliminating of clinging to the 5 aggregates. In last week's class, I taught the 5 aggregates in detail: form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. I explained what each one of those are, and that this is what makes a living being. And you can independently verify this because you know you're a living being, and you can now see that you have all 5 of these aggregates. Well, one of the things that you learn as part of this, and it's being described here, is that you learn to not cling to these 5 aggregates. Because as long as you're clinging to these 5 aggregates, you will experience discontentedness. So let me give you an example. If you cling to this physical form, this body, and now your mind is holding on to this body, thinking that this body is permanent. Now, if you see a wrinkle, or you see a gray hair, or you see a little bit of fat, or you see a mole or a pimple or something like this, now you're going to be discontent because of it. So if you understand that this body is not you, it doesn't belong to you, it's just a physical body, and it's going to be constantly changing. When you see that you're losing your hair, or you see gray hair, or you see a wrinkle, or you see a pimple or a mole or a little bit of fat here and there, what have you, you won't be all shaken up by it. You still need to maintain the health of this physical body, but you're not clinging to it, trying to make it permanent. So that when you walk by a mirror and you see a pimple, it's like, all right, there's a pimple. What do I need to do? Let me wash it. Let me clean it. Let me be sure I attend to it, or whatever you're going to do to it. But you don't get all angry or frustrated or irritated, or, oh my goodness, who am I going to see today? Oh, this is so terrible that I have a pimple, or something like this. So you need to eliminate any clinging to this physical body and understand that it's going to be constantly changing. Same thing with the feelings aggregate. The feeling aggregate are those conditioned feelings: pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. If you're clinging to these feelings, wanting them to be permanent, then you're going to experience the continued discontentedness. Because if you experience the pleasant feelings and now you're clinging to those, wanting them to be permanent, now when the mind moves to the painful feelings, now you're going to be longing and yearning to hurry up and get back to those pleasant feelings, and now you're going to be chasing with craving. So you need to not cling to any feelings that are arising in the mind, and realize that this isn't you, that when the anger arises, when the frustration or disappointment, or you miss your mom or your dad or your brother or your children or something like this, understand that those feelings aren't you, and you're not interested in clinging to them. That if you try to hold on to this, then it's just going to continue to exist in the mind. Then there's the perceptions aggregate. The perceptions is how you view the world, your views and opinions, and the way that you look out at the world. And if your mind is unenlightened, there's certain views and opinions that you have of the world that are untrue. And as long as you continue to cling to your views and opinions, then you're going to now have difficulties, because you're going to look at the world through a certain perception. It doesn't mean that you don't have views and opinions. Not clinging to views and opinions doesn't mean you don't have views and opinions. It means that you don't cling to them. Whereas if you have a certain opinion or a certain view about a politician, or about how the world should function, or about one country or another, and now you're clinging to your view and opinion, and now when somebody says something opposite of what you think is true, now you might have argument and you might fight until somebody agrees with you because you're clinging to your view or opinion. But if you have a certain view or opinion about the world and you're not clinging to it, when somebody else has a different view or different opinion about the world, you can be completely content with that, and you just understand that that's impermanence, that not everybody's going to have the same view and opinion as you. But you need to let go of your certain perceptions, your certain views and opinions or beliefs about the world. One of the first ones you need to eliminate is the opinion or the belief or the view that other people are causing you to be discontent. When you study the Four Noble Truths, you get to the point where you replace that view or that opinion or that false belief. You now replace it with wisdom, and you see true reality, that it's your craving, desire, attachments, your wants and expectations that are causing your mind to be discontent. So as long as you cling to your perceptions and you hold on to it, you're not going to be able to let them go and replace it with wisdom. And you're going to maybe fight or argue until you damage your relationships because you're holding on to a certain view or opinion. Then there's the volitional formations. These are the choices and decisions that you make. That if you cling to your choices and decisions, you're going to experience discontentedness. An example that I usually use is that, say right now, you decide you would like to travel to Australia. And now you go out and you buy plane tickets and a hotel and all these different things. And now as you get closer and closer to the date of going to Australia, now say COVID hits and they say, hey, there's no planes going anywhere, you can't go on your trip to Australia. Well, if you're clinging to your volitional formations, your choices and decisions, you're holding on to it. Now when that happens, you're going to be angry, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be irritated because you're clinging to your choice or decision. And now, because you're clinging to it, you're going to experience those painful feelings. Another example that I can give you from my life, there was a retreat that was planned to be in America this year, and that was a decision that was made a year ago. And people got together, 15 or so, 20 people said, okay, we would like you to come to America and we would like you to teach us in this retreat. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll come to America. And here's what you guys would need to do in order for me to be able to come. I don't need anything other than travel expense and food and water and things like this, and then I will come and teach you guys. So from that point forward, there was decisions that were being made to try to accumulate enough support to be able to support me to come to America. But then in the meantime, because of impermanence, things changed. One of the hosts was pregnant and was going to have a baby like 2 or 3 months before the retreat, which was going to make it challenging for her to host. Then there was another host of another retreat that was going to happen in America who got injured at work. And that impermanence now changed things. Whereas if we cling to this decision that we made 1 year ago, even though there's been impermanence that's happened along the way, now when we get to a point where it's time to decide whether or not we go forward with this retreat or not, if you're clinging to that decision, you might be pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, trying to kind of will this into being, and then you're going to make all kinds of unwise decisions or volitional formations rather than just realizing, you know what, we can just let this go. We can do this another year, maybe next year, the year after, we can decide to do this retreat. But if we cling to a decision that we made 1 year ago, then the mind's going to be discontent and you're going to experience all kinds of unwise decisions that, because impermanence has occurred, we're now at a different point in time and we've learned some things along the way. And you know what? The best decision we could make is to just let go and not cling to this decision to have the retreat. So by not clinging to your decisions, as impermanence is happening, you can always make the most wise decision in the present moment, where you can make a decision a year ago that says, yes, we would like to work towards the goal or the objective to have a retreat, but we fully understand that this retreat may or may not happen. It all depends on what happens between the point that we made the decision to have the retreat and the actual retreat itself. If things line up and things work in a certain direction, then okay, we'll have the retreat. But if over a period of a year, things don't quite line up and there's been a lot of impermanence along the way, the best decision in the present moment is to not have the retreat. And if you're not clinging to the decision, then you can do that with contentedness, with peacefulness, with joy, and not be upset about it. So by learning to not cling to your decisions, you can always look at the present moment. Even if you made a decision a week ago or 3 weeks ago, or you made a decision, 20 minutes ago that you were going to do a certain thing, if there's been some impermanence in the last 20 minutes and now in the present moment, it doesn't look like it's a wise decision to keep going forward with that. If you're not clinging to your decision, you can let that go and decide to do something else. So if you're like saying, okay, I'm going to go get my car washed, and you're on your way to get your car washed, and then you see smoke billowing out of the car wash, if you're clinging to your decision, you're going to be upset and angry that you can't get your car washed. But if you realize like, hey, there's been a fire at the car wash, you know what? Let me go to this other car wash. Or you know what? Let me wait until next week and I'll get my car washed next week. No big deal. You're not clinging to your volitional formation or your choice and decision. And that allows you to reside more peaceful and joyful when you're not clinging to your decisions. And then the last aggregate is the consciousness aggregate, or the mind. There are certain things in the mind that if you cling to the mind itself, or you cling to those certain things in the mind, like the self-identity, then that self-identity that the mind's clinging to, it will cause discontentedness. So you would like to get to the point where you're not clinging to the physical form, you're not clinging to the feelings, you're not clinging to your perceptions, you're not clinging to your volitional formations, and you're not clinging to the consciousness or the mind itself. And by eliminating the clinging, now you can reside more peaceful and joyful, because as impermanence happening, you're not clinging to any one of these aggregates at all. And you can get to the point where you attain enlightenment, or as the Buddha is saying, that you're at the door of the deathless, where you're no longer clinging and holding on, and you can escape all of this discontentedness in the cycle of rebirth. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. So we'll go to the last chapter for today, which, let me just check it out, which one it is, because I see we're close to when we usually end class. I think we'll go ahead and read this if you guys would like to read it, or we could just open up to questions. Let me see if we're going to get anything beyond what we've already been discussing. We've already discussed this in that last chapter. I just discussed the same exact teaching. The Buddha's just saying it in a different way here. So let's do this. Let's just see if there's any questions on this chapter, because if you guys are studying this before class, then you might have questions. Are there any questions on this chapter? Marcy, are you okay if we don't read this one?
Absolutely, Teacher David. I do have a question for you, but it's not regarding this chapter. But so whenever, if there's a moment at the end of class, I'd like to ask you that question.
Okay, perfect. So it doesn't look like there's any questions on this chapter. If you guys read this and you have any questions after reading what the words of the Buddha are, and then the words that I've shared here about this chapter, you're always welcome to post it in Facebook. You can ask in a class, you can send me a private message, or you can schedule personal guidance and I'll be able to help you. But this one is essentially explaining the things that I've already explained through the other chapters. So we'll just go ahead and end that here. Go ahead, Marcy, what's your question?
Thank you, Teacher David. This question actually has something to do with meditation. If you feel like this may not be the class to ask it, I won't. But basically my duration of my meditation time has started to increase, and towards, I would say probably maybe halfway through, because I'm not watching a clock, I'm starting to get headaches right here. Mm-hmm. I feel a lot of pressure in the head, and I start to feel pain behind the eyes. I obviously continue through with my meditation, but that's something that's been arising, and I don't know if that's normal or not normal. Is it something that maybe I should have looked at or not looked at, but it's something, because my meditation times now, I'm going to like 45 minutes, I'm actually finding time where I could just sit and not worry about anything else, and I just go into a meditation, and they're lasting about 45 minutes. I've had like an hour meditation as well, but I'm starting to develop that pain in my forehead.
Okay, this is the third eye is getting ready to open. You're starting to develop the mind to a point where the third eye, or the inner eye, the inward looking eye, is getting ready to open. As you're training the mind, there's physical changes to the brain that are happening that can produce pressure and different things in the skull. And this is normal, it's impermanent. It shows that you're actually making progress, and this is actually what you'll experience. As you're starting to move into the jhanas, you can start experiencing these types of things. And right in the middle of the eyes, in the middle of the forehead like that, that's the third eye that's getting ready to open up. And what you might notice as you continue to meditate and you work through this, you might get to a point where you feel this bliss that comes into the mind. You might notice that there's this deep wisdom, that you start to be able to have this inward looking eye. And just in your daily life, you're just like walking down the street and all this wisdom starts coming into the mind because you now have this more introspective way of looking inward. So this is normal. Just keep going and know that you might experience some bliss or this real excitement as this kind of starts opening up more and more. And you might notice this flood of wisdom start coming into the mind, where it's just like throughout your day, you can be bombarded with all these like really deep thoughts, these really introspective thoughts, and just you start uncovering so many aspects of the path that the Buddha didn't even teach. That he didn't teach these things because he knows you're going to discover it on your own. So you might start learning about things and understanding things in a way that he's not explaining. And this is where you need to restrain the mind, not allow the conceit to come in, because you're going to start learning things and understanding things when the third eye opens up that isn't taught in the teachings of the Buddha. And it's not that he didn't know these things. It's just that he didn't need to teach them because he knows you're going to discover it on your own. So you might start getting all this wisdom, and sometimes the conceit can arise during that time frame. And then when that bliss is arising, it feels very pleasurable. So you got to be observant of that as you experience this ultimate bliss, that you don't allow the mind to dwell in that, and that you still restrain the mind. So this is going to continue to happen until your mind fully breaks through into the jhanas and your third eye fully opens. It's not anything that you need to have checked out, that each person's going to experience this typically, and it's a normal part, and it just shows that you're accumulating the benefits of the path, and this is exactly what you would like to occur, that the mind is showing signs of awakening. But of course, there's a whole lot more work to do. It's just one of the indications that things are headed in the right direction. All right, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions. I would just like to thank all of you for participating in the class. Those of you guys that read, thank you. Thank you, Donnie, for looking out at YouTube and Facebook. I appreciate that. Thank you all for your questions. And thank you for even just attending the class, even if you didn't ask any questions, or just participating in the class and deciding that you would like to learn is really helpful. The more individuals that choose to learn and practice these teachings, the better for the entire world. So whether you're watching this live and participating through learning that way, or you're watching this on the replay, thank you for deciding that today is the day that you would like to learn the teachings of the Buddha. Because more people that awaken their mind to enlightenment, the world's just going to become a more peaceful and joyful place, a kinder, more gentler and loving society that we can all appreciate and benefit from. So tomorrow, we're going to be in our group learning program, and we're coming towards the end of that. We've got about another, kind of 6 weeks or so that we're going to be ending up the group learning program, and then we're going to restart it from the very beginning on the 13th of August. Tomorrow is chapter 20, and this chapter is titled Animal to Human, the Evolution of Our Consciousness. This is where you start learning a bit about the cycle of rebirth and how most of us have been reborn from the animal realm into the human realm. And in that human existence, when we come into the human world, our mind is still conditioned by our animal existences. And this is why some people think about human beings as being animals. We're not animals, but the unenlightened mind tends to function very much like an animal because it's been conditioned from our previous births in the animal realm. But then what this path to enlightenment is helping you to become a better and better human being. And you can see this evolution of our consciousness when you study it and you look at these animal existences and what you experience in all the different 5 realms, and what you experience as you're moving from those lower realms into the human realm. And it helps you to understand why your mind gets so angry and fearful and other discontent feelings and jealousy, and why do you have conceits and all these other things. It can be explained through the cycle of rebirth in your previous existences in those other realms. And now that you're human, what you're trying to do is you're trying to shed these animal instincts and become a better and better human being. So I'm going to be talking about the 5 realms of existence, what each of those realms are, what you experience in those realms. And we're going to be talking about how we move from the animal realm into the human realm. And now our goal is to become a better and better human being. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation together. So you're welcome to join for that, either live or on the replay. So thank you all again. I appreciate all your dedication. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.